Welcome to part 3 of A Consumer's Guide to Buying a Franchise with your FranX experts. Today, we're talking about, is a franchise right for you? Coming up next. I'm going to frame this. Brent, you can go first. Charles, you go second. I'm going to frame this in a very simplistic way. I think this section fails. I was reading through this. It says, is a franchise right for you? And you can see it goes through your investment, your abilities, and your goals. And based on everything that the three of us have spoken about over the last few years, we don't talk about that first. We're talking about purpose or mission or values before we get there. And so when I was reading through this and saying, all right, we're going all about money to start, and I don't know if that's right or not. I want you guys to chime in, but I felt like that's not the first question you should be going through when buying a franchise. So when I'm starting to locate what are the gaps in the way that this is educating the buyer, are we setting the expectations incorrectly? So it's on the screen. They kick off with your investment. How much money do you have to invest? How much money can you afford to lose? Which I hate that question. Are you purchasing the franchise alone or with partners? Do you need financing? Where are you going to get it? What's your credit rating and credit score? Do you have savings or additional income to live on until your franchise opens and you hope becomes profitable? I think this sets it negatively. Brent, thoughts?
Yeah, I think before even that, you're right. There's questions before the investment, and I think the goals are really important. And certain franchises will cash flow quickly if that's what you're looking to do. For example, replace a six-figure income, one we hear often. And some people are looking to build something that has a high value at exit and are building something for legacy and the kids. And there's different types of business, of franchise models to achieve that for you. So before you can just throw around the number of what you want to invest, you have to figure out what you're trying to do with your franchise and what your goals are. And I think oftentimes people don't do that. They just get enamored by oftentimes passion, right? That's a big one we see is I love dogs, so I have to own a doggy daycare. And there's a lot of things that they need to understand.
He was worried about it. He was worried about it happening.
It happened.
Either Brent did it. You said it happened, but either Brent did this because he's trying to be funny, like he just, and then he kept going. All right. Any other comments on that, Brent? You had great momentum.
No, I think the last thing in case I cut out is just once you understand the goals, the investment is important. And oftentimes I think a good strategy is to understand the item 7, what the actual investment range is, and budget for at least the medium of that, and then validate that with the franchisees. Finally, working capital is a big one. Validate that with franchisees too. Oftentimes it's not what it says in that FDD. Then you're in a better position to understand if you actually qualify and you can afford the franchise.
Let's watch this. I haven't played the light bulb,
and that was a good idea.
That one's for Brent. I think that's an important one. I haven't heard that before. You said validate the operating capital with franchisees. Great points. That when you're going through due diligence, you should be bringing up operating capital as a question. That's a tremendous insight. Charles?
Yeah, I think you guys nailed it, right? The topic is a franchise right for you, right? So the first two, investment is really more of the how-tos. It's all about your goals. So everyone listening to this, is a franchise right for you, or should you buy a franchise? What's your goal? To Brent's point, are you looking to replace income? Are you looking for supplemental income? Are you looking to build a legacy? Start with that goal and then decide the pathways: career, investing, buying a franchise. So I think you have to get through that umbrella first on the goal level.
Well, Charles, you just said, are you thinking about creating legacy, right? And so you just addressed how will buying a franchise impact your family. And so the way that the guidebook says, your goals, here are their goals. What are your reasons for buying a particular franchise? Do you need a specific minimum annual income? Do you want to work in a particular field? Are you interested in retail sales or performing a service? How many hours can you work? That's another one that I don't like that. How many hours are you willing to work? Do you intend to operate the business yourself or hire a manager? Will franchise ownership be your main source of income or supplement your current income? Are you in it for the long term? Would you like to own several outlets? Are you willing to let the franchisor be your boss? Like, I don't think that hits the mark from a goal standpoint, because you just hit on, like, ultimately, what are you trying to impact your family? Comments on that, Charles?
Yeah, I mean, look, the questions are a little confused, but at least they're trying, right? And there's a jaded perspective from someone working in the security of a giant government bureaucracy with government benefits and salaries, and you don't even have to produce. And like whoever wrote this is worried about a franchisor being their boss, whereas they're just sitting in a government job and never going to have accountability and can't get fired. So to hell no. Yeah, I mean, look, some of this is confused. If should you buy a franchise, start off with what your goals are and what you're looking from it, right? And then once you decide what you're looking for, then you could evaluate your ability, your capital, and then the opportunities, right? And that's really where it comes down to. Some of this is negative, some of this off point, but give the FTC credit for trying here.
Well, and the bigger picture statement is where some of this kicked off, was that when I've asked anybody in franchising to go back to the last day that they weren't in franchising, could they explain what franchising was or is? And the answer is no. And so here, unfortunately, this is one of the few guides that exist for the buyer. And again, like from my viewpoint, this is setting it up to be all about money, one-dimensional. When you're saying the franchisor is your boss, the franchisor is not your boss. You are your boss. Franchisor gives you tools. So, Brent, any additional feedback on what Charles or I said?
No, I think, Charles, you hit on a good point. Like, the FDD is written to be heavily weighted against you as the franchise buyer. And this is an attempt to counteract that and have them understand a little bit from the side of the franchisee. And I do think that a lot of these questions, confused. I just think, I mean, if you're asking these questions, how much are you willing to lose? How many hours are you looking to work? They're prime indicators of you should absolutely not own a franchise. If you're already thinking about defeat, if you're already thinking about, well, how much time do I have to put into this business? Then if you answer yes, or you agree, or you like those types of questions, you should probably move on pretty quickly. So I think it's good to ask them. I think they're just strange questions for folks like us and the franchisees that we work with and the franchisors. We read these and think, never in my right mind would I want to think like that, because I understand the impact it would have on my business.
Brent, I think you're conditioned best to answer this question and take it in either direction. Is a franchise, what questions are a franchise broker asking the candidates? And obviously you're a franchisee too. What questions did the franchisor ask you during it? Did it align with any of this stuff?
There's some of this. I think some of the investment questions are similar. They're probably the closest things. But in terms of abilities, no, not so much. Like, good franchisors understand the skill sets needed, but they're really looking for a culture fit more than anything else. And that's assuming that the finances line up. So none of these types of questions come up from the franchise, or you probably get some from franchise brokers for sure.
What questions do come up?
From good franchisors, I think just prying questions, right? Like, a lot of the times as a franchisor, what we're seeing are looking for some of these things too. Do they have that right mentality? If they're asking questions like, how much time do I have to put into this business? And it's an owner operator model. They're questions we want to dive into and understand if that's how they really feel, because we wouldn't want someone like that in the system. But we've seen a little bit more of folks coming in with a mentality of, franchise, is a franchise right for me? And they're weighing it up against other options, other investment vehicles. Or should I be investing in the stock market? Or should I just keep my job? Or should I just try and build this business on my own?
Yeah.
And they're really good questions to ask as a franchisor. And because I know a lot of the franchisees, if any of them watch this or potential, probably have a lot of those oars going through their mind the whole time they're going through the franchise process. It's not just solely about this is the Zor in our lane thinking, what are their questions on this brand or this model? You have to understand they're oftentimes weighing this up against other options too. And we're seeing more and more of that right now as the economy is a little strange.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting too.
Charles, how many of these questions or things that we've discussed should go on a franchisor's website prior to even talking to the candidate?
I don't know. I don't know how you'd articulate it on the website. I love Brent's focus on these or questions, right? Because I think as a franchisor, if you're focused on those categories, it depends on your brand, right? Lower startup cost, business, mobile, maybe it's supplemental income. What is that or? Like, should I do this? Should I buy this franchise or what, right? So if it's a lower cost supplemental income business, there may not be that many ors. This is just bolting on. If I'm spending $1 million to open up a retail or restaurant, I think those are powerful questions because now it's or invest in the stock market or buy Bitcoin, which everyone should do, or whatever these things are, right? So if you're focusing on that, it's forcing you as a franchisor to become much more disciplined. So if my or is invest in the stock market, well then are we talking about a manager operated business? Are we talking about a strong item 19 with financial performance? And if that's the case, we need to be telling that story or providing that data, right? If the or is passive investing, legacy building. So I think those or questions should lead you into the data and info you should be providing on the website.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. I mean, the last thing that I do want to call out on, I'm going to highlight it on the screen. Be brutally honest. I think this is probably the most sound advice in this section. If you're considering buying a franchise, be brutally honest with why you're doing it and what you expect out of it. When you start getting into the financial side, I've always felt this way, and I understand why we disclose most disclose average. But if you're thinking that you're going to be average in a brand, don't do it. Like, go into it saying, I'm going to be awesome at this. We've talked about my opinion on the rule of 3. Be funded enough to open up 3, or make sure you really have grit and hustle to offset some of the cash. And so when you're determining if a franchise is right for you, I think it's a lot of internal digging on what's going to bring you the most and heaviest amount of happiness, and then landing it into the right brand for you. So I'm glad that we got to at least view this one. The next section, I think we're going to have fun on because they start going through brokers now. So I think that's going to be a good last piece. Brent or Charles, final thoughts?
I think final thoughts on this end. If you want to dumb it down into 2 categories, right? If you're really wondering, should I buy a franchise or not? I really think you can, we've seen that you can fall into 2 categories. You can fall into people who value control. So those are the folks that figure out franchising is not for them. Those are the folks that like the idea of tweaking the business model, of having control of how they operate that business, trying things, doing things their way, not having to pay someone ongoing royalties. And then you have the other group, which is those that value community. And in this case, it's the idea of a franchise support mechanism, support staff, other franchisees, and a community of people to lean into. And ultimately the idea that community can better drive your business forward and success. So if you really want to dumb it down into just 2 things, are you someone that values control or community? And if it's control, you should very much quickly move on from franchising.
Good point. Final thoughts, Charles?
Yeah, no, that's, well, I mean, back to the brutally honest, right? I wish they would have finished the sentence, right? Be brutally honest because it's a critical life decision, right? And buying the right franchise can improve your life and your family, and buying the wrong one, could cause significant losses of time. So, I mean, I think, if they extended off the be brutally honest, and I never thought about, I love Brent's point about community, right? if you select the right franchisor, you're tapping into that community, that institutional knowledge and success. And the wrong one is, the reverse of that. So definitely brutal honesty there.
Well, and let's close with this. I mean, I said Brent's a franchisee. He's sitting in Cabo. Like, you want to find the best franchises, call Brent. Like, clearly he knows what he's doing.
Yeah, I mean, he's there most of the year too.
I wish.
Another episode of FranX. Take care, everybody.